Hey, everybody, it's Ron Johnson, and this is the Ron Johnson Show on Locked On Sports Minnesota. I want to thank you guys for joining me today, and you are not going to be disappointed. I got Duane Clemons joining me in the Hang On with Ron Johnson segment. For those that don't know, he was a first-round draft pick, 16th overall to the Minnesota Vikings, and he played on that 1998 team. He played on that 1999 team. And this guy got kicked out of a game. He got fined on Monday Night Football for doing some stuff that today's internet would have loved to play over and over and over again. Also, some insight into that team missing a field goal, 15-1. We'll talk about all that. Of course, the Minnesota Vikings have to cut down to 53, and I got an idea of who it might be. We'll talk about that next, coming up on the Ron Johnson Show.
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcasts. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. Now the Ron Johnson Show. On the field, in the broadcast booth, Ron Johnson is Minnesota sports. He's played with them, hung out with them, and grown up with all the big names in Minnesota sports. They're hanging out with Ron Johnson. It's the Ron Johnson Show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. And it starts now.
Hey, everybody, it's Ron Johnson, and this is the Ron Johnson Show. It's a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday. No better time to talk football. I mean, I was out at Gophers practice yesterday. I'm probably going to go today as well. The state fair is coming up on Thursday. We'll have the PJ Flex Show. Also, a little special Ron Johnson at the state fair segment that we're going to air for you guys. Questions for the fans just about the Vikings and Gophers and see what kind of content we can get from the state fair. But on today's show, I got to let you know, Duane Clemons is joining us. He was a first-round draft pick, 16th overall to the Minnesota Vikings, and he was part of one of the most historic Viking seasons. When you talk about a Super Bowl chance, that was probably one of the best ones. I mean, we're not talking Case Keenum. We're talking well before that. We're talking Chris Carter, Randy Moss, Jake Reed. I mean, that team was loaded, and he was a part of it on that defensive end. But I want everybody to know, before we jump into the show, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Come on now, people. YouTube TV. I mean, NFL Sunday Ticket, any game, anywhere in your market. Come on, people. $5. That's all you have to do. Bet $5 and you can get a free trial. A 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. All you have to do before September 22nd, make that bet. That means that's 3 weeks of you watching games on the go, right on your device, no matter where you're at with your kids. But just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's LOCKEDON. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Well, as I said, I'm going to bring my producer to the show, Sam Ekstrom. We got Duane Clemons joining us in the Hang On Ron Johnson segment coming up next. I'm looking forward to that. We also got the Daily Three people. It's back, 3 questions, 3 minutes each. But it's a lot of football. I'm excited now. This is when fall and sports get fun. I mean, I know there's hockey. I know there's baseball. Basketball season is super exciting, but there's nothing like football. You got college and pro football here in the state of Minnesota. Vikings preseason game number 2. And I spent more time on the Gophers just because I wasn't that excited about the preseason games. I'm gonna be honest with you, Sam. Like, practice, from what I'm hearing, that Browns practice week seems to be like that was the big talker. Like, that's where all the stuff happened. That's where all the one-on-ones happened. The Myles Garrett speed rushes and the JJ versus what's his name? Their cornerback that's supposed to be Emerson, that's supposed to be really good. JJ, he locked JJ up in one-on-ones, had the pick, and then JJ turned around and burned him on a red zone touchdown. And then he's looking like, where are you at now? Where's all the talk now? Like, that was the week. That was the one-on-ones. That was the 2s versus 2s. That was really getting the looks. The preseason game itself, we saw a little bit of Tristan. We saw a little bit of did we even see Jalen Naylor? Yeah, we did. A little bit. We saw a little bit of Jalen Naylor.
Speedy. Good back shoulder throw on that first drive, if I remember.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yep. So a little bit of Naylor. We had a little bit of Brandon Powell, and then we had everybody else. And so my takeaway from this, Sam, is I feel like the fact that Jalen Naylor, Tristan Jackson, and Jalen Naylor we knew because he's 3. But Tristan Jackson being able to take off the pads early, I think he kind of solidified himself in that first preseason game with that 100. I mean, it's not just the game, though. It's all week, probably the week in Cleveland, Also, the work up into it, the past, season being with the Vikings as well. They saw the work he's put in. I think he solidified himself as 4. I think Brandon Powell, in my opinion, is 5, but I think 4 and 5 are interchangeable depending on what's going on. Like if they need an outside receiver, I think it's gonna be Tristan. If they need a slot, it's gonna be Brandon Powell. But that's what I took away from that preseason, just offensively. I don't know. What did you get?
Yeah. We have the same wide receiver hierarchy. I've got Naylor 3, Jackson 4, Powell 5. Glad you agree with me because you're a wide receiver and you've got a good eye for it. I obviously Lewis Cine was a big story.
Yep.
Probably played himself onto the bubble at minimum. I think we had him off the roster, and now he's probably back in contention to be on the roster after showing what he showed: 10 tackles, a sack, and a pick.
Yep.
But you're right, Ron. It was a little bit of a letdown. I think because of the week that we had, losing McCarthy, Addison getting hurt, Thayer Thomas getting hurt. Really, it was nothing but bad news, and we didn't get to see a lot of the starters. Like in the first preseason game, we got all the starters. We got JJ, and we didn't have any of that against Cleveland. So it was a bit of a letdown. Good to see some of those bottom of the roster guys ball out. That 7th round pick, Levi Drake Rodriguez, looks like a player.
Really good.
But we'll see. It'll be more of the same against Philadelphia, I think, on Saturday. So you got to love the position battles to love the preseason. You got to love the bottom of the roster guys duking it out for those 52nd, 53rd spots.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, 53. And Sam, I'm big on spreadsheets and PowerPoints. And so during the we were on the radio during the post game show with KFan Radio, and so doing the post game show, I kind of highlighted the players, and Nordo and I kind of went back and forth, and we had the Kevin O'Connell interview, we had the the GM kwesi-adofo-mensah interview, and Sam, I read the tea leaves, and when Kwesi made the comment about what they were looking for in offensive line, I kind of changed my offensive line thoughts, because last year they carried 9. This year he kind of threw the number 8 out. He didn't say 8, he just said 8, and I thought it was a Freudian slip. And so when I look at if they do carry 8, Christian Darrisaw, Blake Brandel, Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, Brian O'Neill. We know that's the 5. I think Dalton Reisner is pushing Ed Ingram, so that's going to be 6. Yeah. I'd say Walter Rouse is probably, the way he's playing at tackle, is for sure 7.
Yep.
When you're looking at 8, so this is the question mark for them, because last year they were 25 and 25. It was 25 offensive guys, 25 defensive guys, 3 special teams. They were dead on the mark. I don't know if Kevin O'Connell is going to do that again, because you never know. But I have a feeling Michael Juergens, putting him at we know he's a guard, but they played him at center because Kwesi was like, I want to see some of these guys play other positions, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now, I heard some people say, they love David Quessenberry. Yeah, they do. But if he's being outplayed right now at the tackle position over Walter Rouse, then could they see Walter Rouse being the swing tackle and not Quessenberry, and say, hey, we would rather have one swing tackle who can go either way. They have pretty decent, healthy-wise tackles. Guard, we know we have what we have, but then center, do we have another backup center? No. Because Dan Feeney is only giving you center. Juergens give you center and guard. And that's where I think that's going to come down to it. If they do decide to go at 9, the problem then that 9 offensive lineman, because it would be Quessenberry and Juergens, I think Feeney's the one out. From there, then that cuts down on the possible N'Keal Harry bit. I don't have N'Keal Harry highlighted. I've highlighted some guys right now. I don't have N'Keal Harry highlighted. I don't have Juergens, Feeney, or Quessenberry highlighted. I don't even have Jaron Hall highlighted, but I'm probably going to have to, because it just seems like he's going to be the 3rd quarterback. I don't have Deshaun Jackson, Lucky Jackson, or Ty James. I don't have Trent. I don't even have Trent Sherfield. Because people keep saying Trent Sherfield and they signed him to a 2-year deal, but yeah, they can put him on practice squad. I mean, they can literally just put him on practice squad and say, hey, look, we want to see what we can get out of you next year, maybe. They can also cut him because the 2-year deal they signed him for isn't a lot of money. And so I could see them cutting him. But Trent Sherfield Jr., I don't have him highlighted. He could be special teams. But then it comes down to Johnny Munt, Nick Muse, Josh Oliver, TJ Hawkins, and Robert Tonyan. I don't think they can carry 5 tight ends, and that's the problem. N'Keal Harry is the one I think is going to be out in that, and I also think possibly Nick Muse, because I think it's Johnny Munt, Josh Oliver, TJ Hawkins, and Robert Tonyan. We know he's on the pup with TJ. So Nick Muse maybe, or N'Keal Harry stays until TJ Hawkinson comes off the pup. But That's why you play the game. And that's kind of offense. Maybe, next week we'll do a little bit more defense because we'll have a better idea after this game on Saturday. But yeah, it's going to be tough. Kevin O'Connell has tough decisions. Kwesi has tough decisions. But one decision they don't have to worry about anymore is they signed Stefon Gilmore. And I said it right away on the post-game show. I said it on the pre-game show as well. We were on TV. I said on the pre-game show, I was like, $10 million. I was like, I guarantee it's $10 million. And you can, and for those that watch the TV show, shout out to everybody that continues to watch. I think they said it was, which is so weird. I never understood these preseason numbers because they just try to get an idea, I guess, of, and they said it was like over 400,000 people tuned in for the preseason part of the bit. And then up into the game, and then they started to lose people after, I think first quarter. Cause a lot of people just kind of like, all right, I'm gonna scroll back and forth and, it's not that big of a deal. But that gives us an idea of like this first game, Giants 49ers, we might hit that 2 million mark because now I feel like people are excited again about the season. Like nothing against Kirk Cousins, but it was like, I know what we're getting. We're getting the quarterback that's been here. Now with Sam Darnold, I think everybody is really excited to see what week one's going to look like for the Minnesota Vikings, and it's Daniel Jones. So that's a good thing. Playing Daniel Jones early. He doesn't look ready yet. He doesn't look like he's in midseason form, unless interceptions and almost taking sacks in the end zone is midseason form for him. I'm super excited about what's coming up next for the Vikings. But when you think about that, having Stefon Gilmore, Sam, where do your thoughts go? Quick, because we got Duane Clemons going to join us in the Hang Around Johnson segment next. He's waiting in the green room. But when you think about what's next for the Minnesota Vikings, now you got Stefon Gilmore, you got Shaq Griffin, you got Byron Murphy Jr., and you got a Caleb Evans. You also have Fabian Monroe. So now you think about some of these guys they've added, like Fabian Monroe, like McCain. Bobby McCain technically is a safety, so I think we'll see what happens with him. And because we thought Lewis Cine was out because of Bobby McCain, but now Lewis Cine looks better than Bobby McCain. And just because they played for Brian Flores before doesn't mean anything. Like, it's about what have you done for me lately, and we know that's what the NFL is about. So where are you going to go with this Stefon Gilmore bit?
I don't know if you saw this, Ron. This is very interesting. So they updated the depth chart on Vikings.com to reflect Gilmore, but they also made a couple other changes. They moved Dwight McGlothern from the 4s to the 2s. They moved.
He had to pick. Not even a pick 6. Point 6. Pick 6 maybe is what he had. The monkey jumped on his back.
Pick 6 gone wrong. He was carrying a piano the final 20 yards. Man. But Gilmore absolutely gives you a credible starter on the outside. We like Byron Murphy. And now your depth just feels so much better between Shaq Griffin, Fabian Moreau, maybe, assuming he makes the team, a Caleb Evans. And it feels like Dwight McGlothern has moved into that rosterable spot. I don't think it bodes well for Duke Shelley. I don't think he's going to make it. Nashawn Wright. I think they've got a decent 6. So it's gone from disaster now, I think, to a serviceable group. They're just going to have to figure out how to play together quickly because Moreau's coming in late. Griffin's been hurt. Gilmore's coming in late. It's going to take a bit for them to gel.
Yeah, and if you look at, where Josh Metellus is, he's behind Harrison. You got Theo Jackson now, who's moved up behind Cam Bynum, which he always was there. But, you remember Theo Jackson came in before. We didn't know what he was going to be. He's up behind him. You got Lewis Cine and Jay Ward in that 3rd spot. Last year, they kept 6 safeties, and that was the whole joke we told all offseason. All preseason. Offseason and preseason about I can't believe how many safeties they kept compared to defensive linemen. I don't think they're going to make that mistake again. That's why I think the offense is going to get hit. I think they're going to try to maybe have an extra D lineman and only 8 offensive linemen and go 24 and 26. But when you think about Shaq Griffin and Dwight McGlothern, I think Dwight McGlothern goes to the 3rd spot. I just think right now with Shaq Griffin's injury, they put him there as the 2 because he's going to be the 2 for now until Shaq's back, depending on when that soft tissue injury can heal up at the hamstring because you never know. But yeah, Fabian Monroe, Jacoby Francis, and then Jalen Williams. Yeah, I think Nashawn Wright and Duke Shelley are probably out. Najee Thompson now, that's the question mark. Because do you really need just a special teams guy? When you maybe can put one of these other guys there in that spot, like a Lewis Cine. Maybe Lewis Cine can show, hey, I can be a gunner. I think the more you can do is going to help you on this roster. And we know that in the NFL. It's like, if I can use you for 2 positions versus this guy for 1, I got to use you. And maybe that's where the rubber meets the road with Najee Thompson, Duke Shelley, and Nashawn Wright. It's like, hey, look, you guys are just special teams guys. We have a guy in Louis that can play defense, and we know now, and can play special teams. But Dwight McGlovern, I think you're going to see a lot of him in this 3rd game because they need to figure out where he can play. This Stefon Gilmore definitely makes you feel a lot better about this now. And Caleb Evans becomes the true backup to him. And then, of course, when we go nickel or dime, we'll figure out who my guess is Shaq Griffin steps in early in nickel, and then probably Theo Jackson, because we've seen him do a lot of cornerback stuff now recently, as well as Jay Ward could also be an option to come in and dime, because Brian Flores is just throwing guys in who I think he's been trying to figure this out, putting Jay Ward at corner, but he is the true 3rd safety, which if they keep 6, he maybe becomes your corner and safety. So 6 safeties, 5 corners, but then Jay Ward is your 6th corner. And so I think maybe that's why he was trying that too, knowing like, I don't need you, but if I do need you, I know you can play it because you've played it all preseason. But coming up next, we got Duane Clemons joining us in the Hang Around Johnson segment. As I mentioned, 1st-round draft pick to the Minnesota Vikings, played on some historic teams with the Minnesota Vikings, and we'll hang out with him next after a word from our sponsors.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. We've been talking about FanDuel all summer, and now America's #1 sportsbook has a new fantastic offer for you now through September 22nd, so about a month from now. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. If you're a Vikings fan, you're not in Minnesota, you want to watch the Purple, take advantage of this offer. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Download America's #1 sportsbook. Bet the Vikes, bet the Twins, bet the Lynx, and get a free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket at FanDuel.
Well, now we got Duane Clemons joining us in the Hang Around Johnson segment. Former 1st-round pick of the Minnesota Vikings, played in, again, some historic games in 1998. I mean, I was a freshman at the University of Minnesota, so I remember that season, and Duane actually was on the team. When you think about the 1996 draft as well in the NFL, I mean, you had Ray Lewis, you had some absolute Jonathan Ogden, who I played with. So with no further ado, we're going to bring Duane Clemons into the Ron Johnson show. Hanging around Johnson. Now we got Duane Clemons, man. Appreciate you joining me, man. Let's talk about quick. I want to get on that 1996 draft, man. That's one of the best, like one of the top draft class I remember early on. Just, when you think about Hall of Famers and some of the names that were in that draft.
Absolutely. I mean, and even the guys that weren't drafted in the 1st round. I mean, you had Teddy Bruschi, you had Mike Allstott, guys that were even late rounds. What's your guy from San Francisco, T.O.? He was, I think, a 2nd or 3rd round pick. So, I mean, there were so many guys in the 1st and 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th round in that draft that really had great careers.
Yeah, and one of my favorite, and this is the reason why, and everybody who's known back in the day, when I went to the University of Minnesota, I had a saying on my wall that said, just give me the damn ball. Tony Dungy was my dad's teammate with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the minute Keyshawn went over to Tampa, Tony made sure that he and I connected. But Keyshawn Johnson was in that draft, 1996. I remember the Rose Bowl because he played against Northwestern at USC. And my high school friend, her sister, dated Gerald Conaway was the guy's name, played cornerback for Northwestern. So we were all watching like, oh, Gerald's going to go against Keyshawn. Keyshawn ate his ass up. I'm talking about absolute murdered in that Rose Bowl. So in that draft class, you had Kevin Hardy, you had Simeon Rice, Karan Riley, and Kirk Blackwell, who's created Sound Mind, Sound Body. I remember, growing up with them in high school. They were seniors when I was a sophomore. They wanted to be Kevin Hardy and Simeon Rice, both out of Illinois. Hadn't been done since like Julius Peppers and, with North Carolina. I mean, you had Cedric Jones, Lawrence Phillips out of Nebraska. So it was just, Terry Glenn out of Ohio State. I mean, Walt Harris. You had Eddie George out of Ohio State. Like that was loaded. And then, you go down to Marvin Harrison, who I had a chance to coach with the coach. So, again, 1996, man, it kind of was like one of those things where, football was football. We know that. But we know when Ray Lewis, Eddie George, a lot of these guys came in, Marvin Harrison, the game was starting to change because then after that you get Peyton Manning and so on and so forth. But I think about the Vikings, 96, 97, before Moss gets there, man. What was that team like?
So I think a lot of people forget that like Jake Reed and Chris Carter were both 1,000-yard receivers. Yeah. We had Robert Smith, Leroy Horde. Both of them were easily close to 2,000 yards between the two of them in the backfield. So there really was no need for Randy Moss. But then now you add this guy to the mix, and it's like gunpowder. All of a sudden, Randle Clemons, he just standing back there throwing the ball 65 yards, throwing these Hail Marys, and then Randy just running under him like it's like we're playing with little kids in the sandlot. And now all of a sudden we can run the ball, we can throw the ball, we can hit you underneath. And then we had a pretty good tight end, Chocho. I don't think people remember Glover, but Glover was like 6'8". He'd run the seam route and, hit you for like 25, 30 yards just every now and again just to change it up. But we had so many ways to attack you. We had power. And then our defense, we were just built to rush the quarterback. And, I mean, man, we had some guys, Jerry Ball, John Randall, Tony Williams, Chris Dolman. I'm sorry, Chris came the year after 99. But, that D-line was just built to do one thing, and that's get after the quarterback and run them down and make big plays. So we pretty much knew we didn't have to play the run because anybody who tried to run the ball, we know that wasn't going to work because we was going to score 40 points.
Yeah, and in that 1998 draft, like you said, you come off of, having 2,000-yard receivers. They draft Randy Moss because he fell to him, honestly. I mean, you think about all the things that could have happened, the teams he probably should have gone to if they were to redo that draft. I know the Cowboys and a bunch of teams are like, oh, heck no, we're drafting Randy Moss. I don't care what people say about him, what happened to him before he got, whatever. Like, he was a 16-year-old kid, XYZ. But, you go out and also get Matt Burke in that draft, who became a really good offensive tackle for the team out of Harvard. But when you look at that, the whole overall, like the overall, Randall Cunningham throwing the ball. You also had Brad Johnson was on the team. You look at Matt Burke.
Culpepper was a rookie. He was like sitting there in the wings waiting to get his turn too.
Yeah, you got Randall McDaniel. And then you got, you talked about that, Chuck Evans, Leroy Horde, Harold Morrow, who I played with the Ravens. Robert Smith was Robert Smith, who was one of the most dynamic running backs. But defensively, the Vikings were known as the purple people eaters back in the day. I know you heard the stories. I know you met the veterans that came back. But when you look at that, Jerry Ball, and I knew Jerry Ball from the Lions because I grew up in Detroit. But you had John Randall. And when you talk about, John Randall, you also had Ben Williams because I know Ben Williams came over to the Ravens as well.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah. But having John Randall, man, as a D tackle, playing defense end, and when you think about that, like what were some of the things that you learned from him? Like when you talk about rushing, getting after the quarterback, talking trash, whatever it might be. What were some of the things about John Randall that you remember, like hearing him say, like, did he just say that or did he just do that?
It's kind of like having Michael Jordan on your team. This man could do anything he wanted to do, anytime he wanted to do. And you were just like it was almost like watching a 350-pound man get treated like a little kid in his way. I mean, when I went to that first practice and just saw the tempo that he practiced at, how fast he went, how intense he was, and just how intentional he was about not only trying to be better than you, but to make sure he dominated you. Like that wasn't just, I'm just better than you. He tried to dominate you. And that was every rep in practice, training camp, preseason, postseason. This guy was the same dude every single day, day in, out. There's not one time I remember Johnny losing a rep. I mean, I'm watching him go up against Randall McDaniel. I'm watching him go up against, some of the best that ever did it. And he's got there, going against, I remember Dallas had that great offensive line with Larry Allen and I'm forgetting some other guys, Eric Williams, and he was just going up and down the line, embarrassing people. So when you have a guy like that setting the tone every single day, setting the bar, and then you go into a meeting room and you're looking at yourself on film and you loaf or, you get stuck on the line, as we used to call SOL, and Johnny's sitting there telling you like, oh man, look at this guy, he's smoking a cigarette while he blocking you, Clem, or, when you're a rookie, man, there's nothing that hurts your feelings more than having John Randall talk down to you or run the film back. Look at you getting stuck on the line. SOL, here we go. Then if you making real money, he'd be talking about you backing up that milk truck and you steal it from the team, or if you were soft, he'd be like, oh, you good for the community. It was such a comedy show to be in that locker room every day and to be like, okay, the highs were high, but if you weren't playing well, you knew it immediately, and he didn't spare no punches.
Yeah, and when you talk about, that group, and because I know we've heard the mic'd up stuff, but like being on the sideline or in a game, is there something he said to a quarterback that even you were shocked that he said to a quarterback or a guy on the other side?
I don't know if he wants me to repeat some of the stuff he said. I mean, it was bad enough what you guys caught on the mic, but I do remember one particular game, and we used to call it taking souls. So when Johnny would make a guy quit, like every now and again, a guy would just refuse to come back on the field. And I believe it was Green Bay. And he was talking about, I forgot the guard's name, but he had memorized the dude's wife's name, the kids' names. And it was just like, oh, yeah, Brenda came by last night. She brought the kids, man. We had a great dinner. We were upstairs, man. She rubbed my feet. Oh, man, she's such a good, and he's just dominating this dude. I mean, he's body slamming him. He's hump moving him, spinning on him. And it was just like, dang, bro, if I was you, I would go get a rock or something, man. You gotta do something, man. This dude talking about your wife, your kids. He knew the grandmama's name. I mean, his whole game, he's having a conversation talking about every member of this dude's family, and ain't nothing he can do about it. Johnny just taking his soul, and eventually the guy went to the sideline and refused to come back out. And I know his teammates had to be like, damn, dog, like, man, I wanted to help you, but man, John Randle, what you gonna do? It's like going to prison. Like, what you gonna do? This dude's bigger than you, faster than you, stronger than you, tougher than you, badder than you. Ain't nothing you gonna do but make him mad and make it worse.
Man, I feel like Craig from Friday with his daddy. Get up, Craig! Like, come on, man, fight back. Get up, Craig. But when you think about you mentioned the Dallas Cowboys, so I got to bring this up. Flozell Adams. Flozell Adams, 1999. I don't know if you remember the date. You probably do, though.
I never forget.
November 10th, 1999. Fined $7,500 on purpose. This wasn't a mistake. Purposefully punching Flozell Adams in the testicles. You said that, he had punched you and did some other stuff. And he threw you down intentionally from behind on an interception. He horse-collared me. Oh, okay. So this is before the illegal horse collar. So he grabbed you by your horse collar, threw you down, so you punched him in the groin. Is there film? Like, because I know you saw the film. Like,
that's still a highlight on YouTube, still running around there. People Google me, and that's like one of the first things that pops up. But yeah, I got into it with Eric Williams. Me and Eric had got into, like, we were throwing full-blown fisticuffs. And so my coach had moved me to the opposite side. And so the very first play I move over to right end, I'm going to run to the ball, and you know how it is. You turn your head to go run pursuit because the ball's downfield. He reaches, grabs me from behind, horse collar me, and then stood over me. Like, real big boy, like, you ain't going to do a damn thing. And I was like, okay, all right, I got to get him. I just went on ahead, let him have it, jogged off the field like nothing, like a smooth criminal. But yeah, it was like at a certain point when somebody does certain things to you, you have to let it be known that you were going to overdo it. And that was that John Randle mentality. Whatever you do to me, I'm going to overdo it to the point that your career, your livelihood might be threatened messing around with me. And that was the intent I wanted to set.
And I'm looking at it now. Yeah, like Flozell Adams is on the ground, rolling around, kicking his feet. Trainers came out there to see what's wrong. The coach is looking at the replay. You guys were up 20-7 in the fourth quarter, 20-17 in the fourth quarter, 12 minutes to go. And they fined you for it. I get it. I guess the retaliation, but did they ever bring up the fact of the horse collar?
No, they never caught him or me on the field. All this happened after that. If it wasn't for the fact that it was Monday Night Football, you wouldn't have even saw it because there were so many extra cameras because the ball was like 35, 40 yards away. So there was no reason for him to grab me or do what he did. But it's like he started it, I finished it, and I was off the field before anybody knew what happened. But of course, he laying there like a gutted fish. Yeah, but of course they went back and watched him. It was like, oh, and you heard the whole stadium. Oh,
yeah, because I'm watching it, and you get up, and then you literally turn and just hit him with a jab, and then walk off the field.
And I was like, I'm gonna be back, because I was telling him, like, listen, I'm not gonna get caught for this, but I told him I'm gonna be back, like, like this is how it's gonna be the rest of the day since you started this.
So did they throw a flag? Did they throw a flag or no?
Nah, nobody saw it. No, nobody, not one person on the field saw it because everybody's attention was down the field.
And so then the NFL watched the tape later and came back and said, here's a little pink slip, 75. Go ahead and donate to your favorite charity. We got to get that about you.
They don't miss much. The NFL find people. They don't miss much. And plus everybody turns in, like, coaches get a chance to turn in a report. Like, if they think somebody did something, you can get somebody fined by basically snitching on them. Like, hey, this guy did this.
Because I see you sitting on the bench too, drinking Gatorade, like nothing happened, and your team, Jerry Ball, everybody sitting around you. What were your teammates saying to you when they saw it?
Oh, they were laughing about it. I mean, we were having a good old laugh about it because, I mean, everybody knows that Eric Williams and Flozell were two of the dirtiest players in the NFL, and they were known for doing crap like that. And so it's kind of like, just understand, when you play the Vikings, we different. Okay. I don't know who you've been playing against, but we're going to give you the business. I'll go put a roll of quarters in my hand and come back and head slap you. Like, that's how gangster we was. We were not for play. Like, I was not going to go back in that room and have John Randle tell me, oh, you got punked all day, or you let this dude do this to you, and you were stuck on the line. Like, nah. If anything, he gonna be in there dapping me up because I'm going to overdo it.
And so looking at this 1998 season, you guys won the division. You made it all the way to as far as you could possibly make it, and it comes down to a field goal, man. What was the emotions of that season and then ending on that moment?
I hate kickers. I think that's the sentiment of everybody on that team. And no disrespect to my man. I know he had a great season outside, but golly, man, I don't think there's a person on that team that likes kickers anymore. I think everybody has one final sentiment is like, we all hate kickers.
Was there ever a doubt in your mind, though, when you look at, because Tampa Bay, you guys blew Tampa out. Then you had a close one with St. Louis. The Lions, you blew out. Bears was a close one. You're undefeated up into the Bucks again. You blew the Bucks out. They came back, and a close one beat you guys 24-27. But then after that, you run it off again. Saints, you blow the Bengals out. Packers. Cowboys is a lot of scoring, but you still win that one. Bears, you blow them out. Baltimore Ravens. Jacksonville Jaguars, you absolutely destroy 50-10. Tennessee Titans 26-16. Like, was there ever a doubt in your mind going 15-1 that you guys weren't going to be Super Bowl champions?
Heck no, man. We knew. We already had our hats on the side. Soon we were calling Gary Automatic. Like, that was his nickname, Automatic. So when we walked into that game, there was no doubt. We didn't expect Atlanta to give us that type of a game. So I guess kudos to them, and shame on us for kind of riding that high life. But, we knew that at the end of the day, we had the best player at almost every position. We had a better D-line, better receivers, better quarterback, better head coach. There was no reason we should have lost that game. We had better running backs, and they were talented. They were a great team, but we just had too much talent to lose to that team or anybody for that year. We barely lost to Tampa Bay because we basically had way too much fun down there in Tampa the night before the game, and kind of a couple of people got lost in the sauce.
And when you think about some of the historic games, like, Randy Moss, he had some ridiculous games that season, like Thanksgiving and some of the other stuff, like that people are like, man, this guy is legit, like one of the best receivers, and he's a rookie. Like, how were you guys taking to that, watching, like a guy like Jake Reed that you guys knew could go for 1,000 yards, but now having to take a backseat to a rookie, which back then doesn't happen. Like, a lot of rookies come in, and it's like you have to get humbled, and you have to play your role, and then you step up when it's your turn.
Well, I felt a lot of empathy for Randy because, we all knew he was a tremendous talent, that the rub on him was about some behavioral stuff that happened when he was young. And, us being players, we understand that. Like, listen, most of these people who make these decisions, they've never been broke. They never went to college and not had no money, not had nobody they could call when they needed things. So, yeah, you might have took some gifts. You might have, broke some rules, but it doesn't mean you're a bad person. You're just a person in a situation where you don't got a lot. And back when we were in college, we couldn't get a gift. Somebody gave you a bag of groceries, you got in trouble. So it was like, when I think about the scrutiny and the kind of the BS that we had to put up back then, and to have that jeopardize your whole career and your whole life and kind of play into draft day, I was a big cheerleader for him, and I just wanted them to win and to overcome all those adversities and obstacles that he had. And, he definitely did that and then some.
Well, yeah, coming out of Cal, going to Minnesota, did you ever think that you would survive the winters of Minnesota? Because I remember, like, coming up on my visit in like 97. That's when I visited the University of Minnesota, my recruiting visit. And it was like a 20-inch snowstorm when I came to visit. For some reason, I'm from Detroit, so it wasn't a big difference for me, but I still committed. But you had no choice. I had a choice, and I still picked Minnesota. You had no choice. So when you came from Cali coming to Minnesota. What was your thought when you got drafted to the Vikings?
So here's no lie. So I'm sitting here at the draft, and I was already, people think like the draft day is supposed to be the greatest day of your life, but when you're sitting there and you're waiting for somebody to decide your whole life, you've been waiting your whole life, and you get picked number 16, that's a long day. Mm-hmm. When you sat there for like 3 or 4 hours, and I think by the time they got to pick 10, I was starting to worry, am I going to get picked in the second round? Am I that guy that's going to slide? By the time I got to the 16th pick in the draft, I was pretty much had been, my nerves were shot just because it's been such a long day. Every pick, you're on that ecstasy, and then it's no, and then it's not, and then it's no, and then it's no, and then finally you get to the point where you stop expecting to get picked, and then next thing I know, Denny comes on the phone and the cameras come back there, and the only thing I'm doing is, I didn't know exactly where Minnesota was. I knew geographically it was way up north and it was freezing cold, but I was racking my brain like, I really don't know where Minnesota was. I had never thought about Minnesota being even a factor. And I guess I really hadn't paid attention to geography in school, but I was like, man, I really don't know where it is. I know it's in the middle of the country. I know it's way up north and it's freezing cold. But I remember they flew me out there from the draft, and I got off the plane, and it was, April? Yep. And it was about 40 degrees with a nice wind, and they start interviewing me on the tarmac, like, right as we get off. And I'm sitting there with my little light windbreaker, and it's like, it's such a nice day, and I'm like, we ain't going to go inside? Like, why are y'all out here? It's like 40 degrees and blowing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is going to be, these people are different. Yeah. These people are different. I'm like, why are we set up outside? 40 degrees is not a nice day in California.
40 days in Minnesota with no snow, 40 degrees, no snow. Oh, man, they will take that any day of the week, 45, 50 degrees. It's still kind of cold, but it could be worse. And so that's why I always wonder, like, because I know I've heard the Eric Kendricks, coming from UCLA, Anthony Barr, same thing. I think Eric Kendricks made the joke about not having a coat. And then he came up to Minnesota, so on and so forth. And, you hear guys coming down from Florida. You just heard Jordan Addison coming from USC, same thing. He talked about that, coming from Cali to Minnesota and what he was expecting. Justin Jefferson coming from Louisiana to Minnesota. So you always get different mindsets of guys. Like Kirk Cousins came from, he went to Michigan State. So, and then he was with the Redskins. So for him, he's like, whatever, and
there's nothing like the sensation of snot freezing in your nose for the first time. And growing up in Cali, I had never experienced that. And then to open your door one day to go outside and to instantly, like, what the, like something just crawled up in my nasal passage and just locked up everything. Like, okay, why would anybody live here? That was like, okay, why is anybody up here? This is, anytime you can die from going outside, why did people settle in Minnesota?
Well, they picked Minnesota, and they're stuck with it. 1998 is a season that people forever will feel like, there's nothing that can go right with Minnesota. They just had J.J. McCarthy get hurt. So the Minnesota thing continues. But I'm Ron Johnson. That's Duane Clemons. We'll have Duane back because we would definitely, as the season goes, we want to get more of his takes maybe on what this Vikings team looks like from a defensive standpoint, because the defensive line has changed. The outside linebackers have changed. They've added – now they're in the 3-4, not a 4-3, but they've added some rush guys. And so we'll have to get his take on Dallas Turner and Jonathan Gennard and some of the guys they have now rushing after the quarterback. But we'll do that once we actually get the roster set. But again, I want to thank you guys for joining me. I want to thank Duane Clemons for joining me on the Hanging with Ron Johnson segment. Coming up next, we got the Daily 3. That's 3 questions, 3 minutes each. And we'll do that after a quick pause. Well, now it's time for the Daily 3. That's 3 questions, 3 minutes each. Take it away, Sam.
All right, Ron. Tua Tagovailoa had some interesting comments about Brian Flores on the Dan Le Batard show. He said, if you woke up every morning and I told you that you suck at what you did, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned this right, and you should have someone else come in and tell you, dude, you are the best for this. You are accurate. You are the best. How would it make you feel? So a long way of saying, didn't love Brian Flores. What's your reaction to his comments?
Well, one, early on as a rookie, he didn't come in and was super great for Brian Flores. If you kind of remember, everybody was talking about Tua's overthrowing guys, or Tua's arms not strong enough, or Tua's not able to get the ball out there early enough. And, you got Jalen Waddle, and I forgot who else he had. He had like some dogs on that team. And so when you look at that team from I think it was 2020, I think that was some of the questions, like what is this team going to look like? Can Tua get it done? And so when you think about Tua Tagovailoa, one, Brian Flores probably is more like Mike Zimmer. And Mike Zimmer, we know, was hard as heck on Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins was good, though. So there was only so much Mike Zimmer could say. Tua was not good early on. Let's be real, because people were talking about he wasn't good. And people were talking about, why isn't this guy better? And people were talking about, was this a bust? And, but, like, these were conversations that were actually had. People were asking Tua at interviews, like, hey, what's going on with your accuracy? What's going on? So if he wants to, like, blame that on Brian Flores, I don't buy that, because when you think about that, Tua Tagovailoa and a quarterback, any quarterback, if you're attacked by a coach like Kirk Cousins, that he felt like maybe Mike Zimmer was hard on him, when he makes a play, he would look at Mike Zimmer and be like, you like that? Like, okay, you don't think this or you don't think that? Do you like that comeback? Do you like that deep ball? Do you like that 4,000 yards? Take that, Mike Zimmer. Like, that's a dog. That's a guy that has a dog in him. I do know Kirk's a little bit, he still had his issues, and still, I guarantee there were things that bothered him about Zimmer. That's why when Kevin O'Connell came, there was all that talk of, oh man, it's so different. That's every organization. We had the same conversation about Zimmer. Now we're having the same conversation about Flores. At the end of the day, they both have jobs and they're good coaches. So some guys loved it. Eric Kendricks actually talked about it and then went and played for him again. So I call BS on some of that stuff. Like, you could say it because you're trying to make your new coach feel good. And I think that's what Tua is doing. But I guarantee if Brian Flores was to get a head coaching job somewhere and Tua was a free agent and Brian Flores saw, one, he's smart. He's like, I'm going to go get the guy that I know is good now. Tua's good now. I guarantee Tua will go play for him if they had that conversation of like, look, I might have been hard on you, but look where you are now. Like, it forced you to get better. It forced you to, he went from 1,800 yards. He didn't play in the first 5 games. He went to 2,600 yards. He went to 3,500 yards and then went to 4,600 yards. One, he added Tyreek Hill, so we know that was part of it. But he still had 14 interceptions. His passer rating with Flores was 87.1. So at the end of the day, I read into it like, hey, Brian Flores was just saying what he saw. He didn't say like he was cursing me out and he just said like he was talking like, man, like, you got to earn this, man. Like, I don't see what they see. Like, they asked you to tank for him. So again, you got to look at his mindset at the time. Brian Flores probably was pissed off that the owners even came to him with that. Like, hey, we got to tank for this guy. And then all of a sudden it is not what you think it was going to be. Like, you didn't tank for Peyton Manning. And that's what he probably was mad at. So I think there was a layer of stuff that comes with that. And I think Tua's forgetting that part of it too.
Yeah, I'm sure Flores is like, man, I've spent years trying to like get my image and reputation like in a good spot to be a head coach again, and then this comes out. Come on, right, man.
Yeah, no.
Good points by you, Ron. There. The Vikings play Philadelphia on Saturday, final preseason game. Ron, you got into the 53-man roster conversation in segment 1. I want to nail down one name from you. Who needs to do the most to ensure a roster spot on Saturday?
I'd say Lewis Cine needs to do a lot. He needs to show this was not a flash in the pan and this was more than one time it's going to happen. I would say Lewis Cine is one. I would say the other, probably Levi Drake Rodriguez. I think he needs to solidify himself too, to show like I have a high motor at all times. It's, again, not a one-time thing. So those two guys for me on defense. Offensively, N'Keal Harry. Like, N'Keal Harry has to show something. Like, they leave him up there in the depth chart, but at the end of the day, you can get cut if you're in the 2s. Like, that means nothing to them. Because if they're getting more out of Johnny Munt, they know they're going to get a lot out of Robert Tonyan, then there's just not room, because it's just the number of it. Like, if they can keep 57 or 58 guys, I think N'Keal Harry probably be fine, but they can't. So,
yeah.
Is he willing to sit on the practice squad because he has no other options and maybe learn tight end for another year on the practice squad? Maybe that's what happens. But I think N'Keal Harry has to show something.
Yeah, and you talked about offensive line, too. I think they've got a rookie battling with a veteran with Rouse and Quessenberry, and then Juergens and Feeney. It seems like those two sets of players are kind of battling for roster spots as well. I'm watching that offensive line. Last one, Ron, fun one. I don't know if you saw this. Hopefully you checked it out. The Falcons tweeted out Kirk Cousins' birthday playlist that he played at Falcons practice. Assuming you got to look at this playlist, it's on X. What was the best and worst of the Kirk Cousins birthday playlist?
So going back to the Vikings, talk about their music has changed since Kirk Cousins hasn't been there, but looking at Kirk, again, I can tell by his list that this is more of like what the Vikings used to play, because it probably was like, well, he's the captain, he's a leader, let's play what he wants. Being in Atlanta, I don't think anybody in the Falcons organization thought any of these songs would ever be, like a lot of these songs wouldn't be played. I honestly, like Stacy's Mom, that doesn't feel like a training camp song to me. Not saying it's not a good song. Yeah, Stacy's Mom, I'm just gonna say that doesn't fit like trying to get ready for football.
Yeah, that's probably the low point of the playlist. Kirk Cousins' taste could not be further from my taste. This is just, it's not my style, kind of and I don't really listen to rock music a whole lot, but the punk rock genre is not really up my alley. Dear Maria, Count Me In, All Time Low. I remember listening to that one when I was 16, 17. I don't anymore. But yeah, there's not one song. Stereo Hearts. Let's go. Stereo Hearts is my favorite. And Stacy's Mom, definitely not fitting in with the football vibe.
And yeah, this is not I wouldn't like, I might listen to this just to see. Like today, maybe I might do that. I might just like put it on in the background while I'm working today. I got practice with my daughter for softball. Maybe I'll have it playing softly or something. But the comments are what's funny. Somebody said, dude never left 2008. He's a GOAT. His vibe, he passed the vibe test. Our QB1 has a banger list. Mr. Brightside mentioned he can stay. Whitest dude ever. So it's an array, but I mean, it seems like it says somebody said, hey, is this a W? So they're asking questions. Kirk was a country boy, not a scene kid. Yeah, like it seems like take the over. So people are saying, I mean, it seems like the Falcons fans like what he has for his birthday playlist. Like, I'm surprised. Like, I just assumed it would be more Atlanta, but like this list is fire. Somebody said this is an old dusty list. So yeah, I just copped the jersey now after listening to this playlist. Like, so yeah, so Falcons people seem to like it. So
authentic Kirk. He's true to himself. He's not swaggy. He doesn't care what people think. He likes his 2000s punk rock songs, and we love him for it.
Well, gotta love Kirk because he's gonna be who he is. But I'm Ron Johnson. Sam Extra as Duane Clemons, who joined us in the Hang Around Johnson segment. Some great stories about John Randle and Minnesota Vikings. Make sure you guys check that out as well. But make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. Just log in with your phone on YouTube. Find Locked On Sports Minnesota. Subscribe. It'll give you all your shows, all the updates as the season goes, because we are going to have late breaking news as the roster's made. We're going to talk about the 53 once they name it. But again, I'm Ron Johnson at Sam Extra. I want to thank you guys and have a great week.